think about something with me for a minute. If God is truly this God, who's the only God who wields all power and who's eternal and ultimate, answering to nobody but himself, then he doesn't have to tell anybody that, does he? He's not obligated to. I mean, wouldn't God be completely and fully within his rights, just to let people think whatever wacky thoughts they want to about whether there's a God or whether that really matters? I mean, all right, God doesn't have to tell anybody that he's the only actual true God, does he? He doesn't have to say it. He's the only one who exists or rules over all things. But he does tell us. He tells Moses and several other people throughout the Bible, and that's a big deal that he does tell us. You see, there's two ways of doing theology. I know this, but everyone is a theologian because everybody has thoughts about God. You either have good thoughts or bad thoughts, so you're either a good theologian or a bad one. So theologians, everybody's theologians here, two ways of doing theology. You can either do theology from the ground up, where you use your brain and your personal experiences, and you do your best job with that to come up with the best possible answer. It's called doing natural theology or evidential theology, and you can do that, and if you do it well, you can come up with some pretty good things about God. But there's another way of doing theology. Instead of doing it from the ground up, you do it from the top down. It's where God comes to us. He tells us who he is, what he is like, and we accept that truth, and then we begin to do theology based upon what he has said, in accordance with what he has told us. It's called special revelation, or doing theology based on what God has revealed to us, sometimes called revelatory theology or presuppositional theology. So think about this. If there is a God, and he did tell us things about himself, revealing them to us, then isn't that way more reliable than just trusting our instincts and our experiences and our reasoning, which is sometimes wrong and leads us astray? Isn't it more reliable to accept God at his word and what he says about himself? And there's another thing here. If God did reveal himself to us as the Lord, doesn't that tell us something about him in and of himself, in his very nature, and that he tells us that this great God would condescend to us and tell us his name? See, naming was a big deal. Not like it's not a big deal what you name your kid today, but it was a bigger deal in the ancient world. Naming was actually, your name almost was seen as having this magical power. One's name was seen as expressing a person's essential nature. To know someone's name was to know their person. Here's how this Hebrew language scholar guy, Terence Fretheim, describes this to us about why God giving his name to us was such a big deal. He says, naming makes for true communion. Naming entails availability. By giving his name, God makes himself accessible. He can be met and greeted. Likewise, it also makes him vulnerable. His name may be misused as well as honored. God, he gives us his name. And the very act of that tells us that he means and wants to know us.